Greetings and salutations, Myth fans. This is Mr. Man Indy, and I am bringing you another version of Urban Myth. This session is a Mythunderstandings regarding area of effect and the basics of playing those particular types of attack cards. This is in reaction to several different forum posts, both on MegaCon Games and on Board Game Geek. Without further ado, let's check out the basics of area effect. So, area of effect basics. When I think of these types of cards, I think and I break them down into really two types of attack cards. And the way I think about it is these are cards that have diagrams. And the diagrams are all sitting to the right of the attack text itself on the card. And these cards like Blood of Gaia, Last Rites, Harvest of Bones, etc. are all examples of cards that have diagrams. That leaves us with the other set of area effect cards, which I call cards without diagrams. And these particular cards are fairly well defined right on the text of the attack itself. So, right in the edge, attack all targets in a 3-square straight orthogonal line. Suicide run. Trace a movement path equal to your dash value. This attack targets each square on the path. Again, I think these are fairly straightforward. So we've got these two types of attack cards, with and without diagrams. And then I also want to point out that if you do have a hero that is in the area of effect of these types of attack cards, they will automatically take damage if you had rolled a successful dice roll against the enemy in the area of effect. So there is no target number evaluation. There is no rolling of a dice pool. If your hero is in an AOE, a successful AOE, it will take the damage listed on the card. Line of sight. Again, this is another important aspect of the game, and this is pulled right from the manual. Basically the way this works is the attacking hero will draw an imaginary line between the center of the hero's square to the center of the target square, and determine whether that imaginary line passed through any blocked squares. And if so, then you don't have line of sight to the target and you cannot make the attack. What blocks line of sight? Enemies, lairs, red highlighted areas, and traps all block line of sight for heroes. This is true for all but the archer. The archer does not have line of sight blocked by monsters. So, as you can see in the diagram to the right, the archer does have the ability to see the grubber, even though its imaginary line drawn between the archer to the grubber does pass through a monster. The archer has the ability to see over monsters, but that's the only blocking element that she has the ability to see over / around. If there was any lair, a red highlighted area, or a trap, the archer does not have the ability to see through those. Now, if that imaginary line went through a hero or an ally or a blue highlighted area, treasure, those do not block the line of sight, and you would have the ability to target a monster where the imaginary line traveled through one of those examples. Okay. Next up is this term orthogonal, and admittedly, I had to go back to the old high school geometry text to look up this word orthogonal when I first saw it in the Myth manual, and frankly, it's just a fancy way of saying right angles, and you can see the difference there. On the screen, orthogonal is at a right angle to that black line, and if it's not at a right angle, it's not orthogonal. How does that equate to Myth and its heroes and the tiles? Well, it's pretty simple. Any right angle to the acolyte, any square at a right angle to the acolyte is considered orthogonal, and you might consider these to be compass headings, north, south, east, west. however you want to think about that, is this is the orientation of orthogonal lines or orthogonal squares to the acolyte, leaving, of course, these squares that are non-orthogonal. The entire picture then looks something like this. And if you were to evaluate a minion that was 2 squares away, you can see this minion is 2 squares away in an orthogonal direction. This minion is 2 squares away in a non-orthogonal fashion. Should make sense. So, cards with diagrams. The cards with the diagrams are Blood of Gaia, Dark Reaver, Mountain Crumbles. These are examples of cards that have, again, the symbols to the right of the attack text, and those symbols either have an AOE with a T square or an AOE that does not have a T square. So let's first start with the T square. Anything that has a T square in it will be a ranged area of effect, and those cards like Dark Reaver that don't have the ranged area of effect have this second diagram that's to the further right, where the AOE actually emanates from the hero themselves. There is no target square. The target of the attack, the attack emanates directly from the hero. So let's start with Blood of Gaia, and let's take a look at an example here where the apprentice is on the tile. There's 5 minions. How would I go about attacking them with Blood of Gaia? Well, let's start before we'll just remove the minions for a moment here. Let's take a look at the actual cone of effect that Blood of Gaia generates, and let's start with that T square. That's the important part of the attack itself. That's where the attack emanates out of or from. So we need to make sure that the apprentice has line of sight to the T square, and that the T square is within the range of Blood of Gaia. So it has a range of 3, so that T square can be up to 3 squares away from the apprentice. As long as the apprentice has line of sight to the T square, you can attack with Blood of Gaia. Now, once you determine what the T square is, then you say, what is the orientation of the cone or of the fan of this particular attack? Where do I put those 3 extra squares of attack next to the T square? I can have it the way I've got here, which is oriented as it is on the card, or you can orient it in this particular type of a fashion where the T square, the target square, is 3 away from the apprentice, and I choose to orient the other 3 elements of the cone to the right of the target square, as opposed to where it was before, which was on top of the target square. Again, as players, we are free to choose where we want to put those 3 squares, as long as it follows the diagram shown on the card itself. Likewise, I could do this. I could make the orientation of the T square the way I have it in this example, but then fan the cone back towards the apprentice. This is a legal orientation of Blood of Gaia. So let's go ahead and bring back the minions. One attack that I might be able to do here with Blood of Gaia is to place the target square 2 away from the apprentice in this type of a fashion, where I have line of sight to the target square. It's within my range of 3, and I'd roll my dice pool and go ahead and attack all of the minions that were in the area of effect. Another example might be if I put the target square 3 away from me and oriented the fan to the right. I could go ahead and attack it in this fashion. Again, target square is within my range 3. I do have line of sight, then the fan of the attack is as seen. Now, what's interesting in this example is you'll see here we have a line of sight constraint where there is a red line that says I can't see that lower right hand shambler, and that's fine. I do have line of sight to the target square, meaning that the fan or the cone of my Blood of Gaia attack will fan out the way I've got it, and it will impact that shambler even though I can't see it with the apprentice. Next up is Dark Reaver, and this is a fairly simple example, I believe. Again, because the attack emanates from the hero itself, and there's a fairly straightforward text on the card. I think this is pretty easy. I mean, attack up to 3 adjacent targets in a 90-degree arc as shown. And so really using this card, because it emanates from the hero themselves, it's just a matter of determining what 90-degree arc we're going to use. There's only 4 possibilities here. It's either upper left, upper right, or lower left. And again, fairly straightforward. So let's bring back the minions. And I could go ahead and choose to attack. Pretty obvious, I think. I would go ahead and attack. I would engage these 3 minions with this particular card, as they are 3 adjacent targets in a 90-degree arc. Now let's say for the sake of this discussion that the brigand started down here and wanted to use this same card. I would say you could orient the attack in this fashion, and you would be able to attack these three minions. However, remember that there is this line of sight blockage. I can't actually attack the shambler that's in the lower right. This particular shambler is flashing. Because this is a melee attack and there's an obstruction, I cannot actually attack that lower right shambler. So in this example, I would only be able to hit 2 of the 3 because of the obstruction that is in place here on this particular tile. Some cards actually extend the AOE. So these 2 cards with diagrams are examples of cards that you have the ability to extend out and make the attack even more powerful. We'll start by looking at Last Rites, and this particular attack is an acolyte attack, and we start off by evaluating what is the target of this Last Rites attack. So you determine what is the T-square, and again, just like we've done in the past, you have to have line of sight to the target square, and it has to be within range defined on the card. In this case, the range of Last Rites is 4, so I could go up to 4 squares away with the target, and as long as I had line of sight, it can be anywhere up to 4 squares away. I'll choose to put the target square here, and then the next question I have to ask myself is, how many faith do I have? And for every faith that I have on my board, I can extend out the area of effect by 1 square. And as you can see, there's 4 squares defined by this diagram. And the first question that we have to ask ourselves after how many faith is, where do we want to start? Where do we want to start extending out the area of effect? The answer to that is it's up to us as players, as long as the first square, the extension, is orthogonal to the target square. So I could have that first square here, I could have that first square here. As long as it's orthogonal to the target square, we're good to go. From there, for every additional faith that I have, you will orthogonally go clockwise to fill out the rest of the pattern. So square 2 would be here, square 3 would be here, square 4 would be here. Now, if I had more than 4 faith, I could continue to extend out this this AOE, and the pattern just continues. So if I happen to have had a fifth faith, that fifth square would be orthogonal to square one. And if I had a sixth square, that would be orthogonal to square two. So again, important to note that squares 2 and 6 are actually outside of my line of sight. I can't see those particular squares, but because I can see the target square, if I happen to have had 6 faith, I would have been able to generate this pattern with last rites. Now, if we take a look at Harvest of Bones, this is another example of an AOE where I can extend it, but this AOE is emanating from the soldier, so this is a lot simpler than the last example. And we first start off with attacking 3 adjacent targets in a 90-degree arc. So again, those targets will be at positions 1 and 3, and we just simply have to determine what position do we want those to be in, or how are those going to be oriented against the soldier. For a 90-degree arc, squares 1 and 3 would be orthogonal to the soldier himself, and it's just a matter of saying, do we want to place the pattern here, or place the pattern here, or place the pattern here. Again, I think it's fairly simple to follow. There's only 4 possible positions for this pattern. Let's say I chose this one, making square number 2 fairly simple to understand where that would reside. And I can extend this AOE attack if I have rage. And if the soldier has played rage cards, he can extend this AOE up to 180 degrees, where if he has an additional rage, the first one would be orthogonal to position 3. And then if there was a second rage, it would be below that first rage, orthogonal to the soldier. And this would be an example of how you could extend out Harvest of Bones. Now, cards without diagrams, I think are fairly simple. They've got a defined starting position on the cards themselves, and it's fairly straightforward in terms of the cards saying what exactly that they do. Again, riding the edge, attack all targets in a 3-square straight orthogonal line, etc., etc. The point I'm trying to make here is, I think if you read the text on the card, these become fairly simple to diagnose and to determine. And however, there are a couple of examples that I think are worth taking a deeper look at, and we'll go ahead and do that now. Orion's Tears is an example of one of these cards that I think can be often misunderstood and misplayed, mostly because I think the ammo the ammo play mechanic is unique, at least at this point, to the archer. Certainly, there'll be more heroes that are coming our way that will have a ranged element to them. But right now, the archer is the only one with this particular play mechanic. Orion's Tears. This card allows me, for every readied ammo card that I have, I can attack one target within range. Let's say I have 3 ammo cards readied, giving me the ability to attack up to 3 targets. And let's take a look at the targets themselves. So we've got this minion, this shambler on the board. The first question we have to ask is, can I see it? I certainly can. It's within line of sight if I draw an imaginary line between center square to center square. It does not travel between any block squares. It's also within my range, so I could attack it. If I happen to have had a minion in this position, if I draw an imaginary line between the hero and the shambler, it will go through center square, that red line. So therefore, this shambler is not seen. It's not a line of sight to my archer, and therefore is not I'll say an eligible target of my attack. Let's say in the corner we have a stalker, and the stalker sits behind the shambler. If I draw an imaginary line between the archer and the center of the stalker, that imaginary line goes through a monster. But because the archer has the ability to see around monsters, the captain or the stalker is a valid target of the archer in this example. I'll bring on a couple of more targets. These are within line of sight and are within range. And so let's talk about how the archer can distribute these three arrows, from in this particular example. So the very first thing that I could do is I could take all three of those arrows and I could fire them into the captain. I can shoot over the minions and into the captain, and assuming I rolled a successful dice pool, I will do 3 damage against that captain, 1 damage for each ammo card. And again, that damage is reflected on the Orion's Tears card itself. Now, I could choose to do that, or I might want to engage these 3 minions. And in doing so, I've got 3 arrows. I can roll my dice pool, and if successful, I will do 1 damage on each of those minions, and will be destroying them with those three arrows, 1 for each minion. Now, I can also distribute my attacks across the types as well. So if it's I can do it against the minion and against the captain if I wanted to. Let's say the captain only had 2 health remaining. I could take 2 arrows, put them into the captain, and take the residual arrow and shoot it at one of the minions if I was so inclined. So again, it's a pretty versatile type of attack, and with the ammo cards, it gives the archer a nice play mechanic. A couple of things to keep in mind when playing the archer, and again, I think this comes from just the uniqueness of the ammo element. But in order to use your bow or your ranged weapon, you must use ammo. So if you don't have ammo readied, you cannot attack using your equipped, in this example, longbow. And you see right on the card it says requires ammo to attack. Also, this might sound redundant, but you must use ammo to attack at a range of more than 1. So for instance, move this particular card, Tumble, move up to 3 squares and attack 1 target within range. If the target is adjacent, this attack gains +1 damage. In order to attack and take the bonus from your bow, you must have an ammo plate. Again, this is this first rule. In order to use your ranged weapon, you must use ammo. I think people play this such that you don't need ammo, and if you do end up adjacent to a target, you can choose to not use ammo and attack with melee. And while you certainly could do that, you would not be able to use the bonus from your bow. Taking that one step further, if we use an attack card without ammo, they are considered to be unarmed attacks, and they must be made at a range of 1. And unarmed attacks only use the base dice pool. So again, if you're going to be attacking unarmed or without ammo, you can only use your base dice pool. Another card that sometimes gives, I'm not sure if people have a tough time with this or not, but this is, I think, a unique way to play the card. And I just wanted to share this with you. Suicide Run gives me a dash of 2, and let's say I played a hustle card along with it, giving me additional 2 movement points, 2 dash, and this gives me a total of 4. And I think most of us know that with Suicide Run, I can I can make a movement path. I can make a path equal to my movement. In this instance, 4, and the line can be however I want. So I could trace a line through these 4 minions and they're diagonally one apart from one another, and I could trace that line, use those 4 movement, and again, assuming that I attacked, my dice pool was successful, I could go through and I would kill each one of these minions as I passed through it. Again, I think this is a fairly straightforward example that most of us know. Let's take this next example, though, however, where I've got a captain sitting next to the brigand, and I have a suicide card played with the hustle. It gives me 4 movement points, and it would allow me to actually, as my first movement, damage the stalker. Again, assuming a positive dice roll here. But my first movement point would be the 1 damage on the stalker. Then I could take the second movement and back to where I started, leaving me another movement point to go back in and do a second damage on the stalker, with the last point of movement to get me back out from the stalker. So those 4 movement points would allow me to do 2 damage on the captain. Again, it's a unique way to play the card, but I thought I would share that with people just in case it wasn't obvious that you could do that with Suicide Run. Lastly, I want to talk about what I'm calling mixed enemies, and there was some confusion on Board Game Geek, and I wanted to go out and try to clear some of the confusion. This is directly from the manual, and what the important here, while it's all important, I think that the takeaway is, regardless of the number of enemies targeted by an attack, each monster type and rank requires 1 success to hit all targets of that type or rank. So let's take a look at this. If I've got this tile with an apprentice, and I have a captain and a minion, a crawler and the stalker next to one another, I might want to play Blood of Gaia to engage these monsters. And to do Blood of Gaia, again, we've talked about this already in a prior part of the video. I would go ahead and determine what the target square is for Blood of Gaia, and I might select this square here, and then fan out the cone behind that target square, or I guess in this example, above the target square, and it would make this type of pattern that you're seeing on the screen. It would allow me to engage both of those monsters with this single attack. And remember, regardless of the number of enemies targeted by attack, each monster type and rank requires 1 success to hit all targets of that type or rank. So let's take a look at the mechanics here. I've got the crawlers and the stalkers on the tile. I want to engage them with Blood of Gaia, and in order to engage each of these monsters, I need a successful dice roll of 4 to attack or to be successful against the crawler, and I need a 5 or higher to be successful against the stalker. Let's pull back up the Blood of Gaia card just as a reminder. And we'll say I've got a focus that I'm also using on my hero board, the Fragment of Fate. And so first is, let's go ahead and build my dice pool. And the dice pool will be made up of my base for the hero, which is 1d10 and 1 fate die. Then if we look at the movement on the Blood of Gaia card, I'm not moving. And so therefore I get an extra d10 out of not moving, staying stationary. I then, because this is a focus attack, I can use my focus item, which is the Fragment of Fate, giving me an additional 3d10 for my dice pool roll. So a total of 5d10 and 1 fate die will be rolled. I go ahead and roll those dice out, and I have a 1, I have 2 3s, I have a 5 and a 7, and my fate die was a rage symbol. I can look at the dice, and the 5 the die that is a 5, I can apply that to the crawlers, and I can go ahead and do the 1 damage against the crawler. Again, 1 damage based on Blood of Gaia, this damage of 1. Then I can take the die that is a 7, and that 7 is higher than 5 on the Stalker card, and I can apply the damage to the Stalker. And I'm applying 1 damage to the Stalker. Just because the Stalker is within 2 squares of my area of effect does not mean I apply damage twice. I only hit the Stalker once, therefore I do 1 point of damage to the Stalker and 1 point of damage to the crawler. Hopefully this makes sense, and this ends my examples for today on the area of effect. I hope you guys got something from this, and certainly as in the past, if there's any questions, comments, corrections, please feel free to post those below in the comment section. And again, if there are suggestions on what you would like to see Random and myself cover in upcoming either Mythunderstandings or Urban Myth sessions, please let us know. Otherwise, hopefully you have a great day. Thanks for listening.